What's going on, Patreon? We're back. Thank y'all so much for your support. As we shared last week, we're really going to start dumping good content over here on Patreon. This is episode 2 of our second official Patreon exclusive podcast, just full-blown podcast just for Patreon that we're excited about doing. We want to, grow this into, part of what we do on a weekly basis as part of our livelihood and part of our job, and so we're taking this very seriously. I know, like I mentioned last week, Patreon, there was times where we were really updating the Patreon a lot, and times that we are posting to Patreon a lot, and times that I wasn't posting to Patreon a lot. And we're going to at least give y'all your own podcast episode each week. We hope to do some more video stuff and whatnot. We're still going to be doing a lot on YouTube. We're still going to be doing, a weekly episode out on, the normal podcast platforms. But this is just for y'all. This is to say thank you and to hopefully grow Patreon, to be something that actually makes a little bit of money. The more I can, make on the backside on this content creation, the less I can guide. And that means the more I can make content-wise, more content I can put out. So, I need to put my headphones on. That's kind of the focus here. So, last week we talked about soft plastic stuff.
Yep.
Soft plastics for speckled trout. And this week we're going to talk about hard baits that we like to fish. So, we're going to talk about topwaters, but we're also going to talk about a lot of subsurface baits that we enjoy fishing as well. So, thanks for checking it out, you guys. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. We're going to get ripping. So, Mike, what is your confidence topwater? Like, if you're going to pick one topwater to throw for speckled trout this time of year, what is it?
Yozuri bone-colored popper. Or it's not a popper. It's a walk the dog, but it's Yozuri. And honestly,
is it one of the 3DS ones?
No. That's what I was thinking at first, but it's not.
Your confidence bait, you don't even know the name of it.
I know. So, weird story on Sierra Trading Post one day, flipping through baits, and I'm like, sure, that looks good. I need a few new topwater. So, I just bought one. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Top Knock pencil. But even though it's called a pencil popper, me and Jud were actually just talking about this one that's sitting here by Berkeley. Even though it's a pencil popper style, yeah.
Right,
it's a walk dog bait. It doesn't have any cup or anything to the front. It can be a little splashy if the water is textured up, but that bait I have caught more trout and redfish on in the last 2 years than any other topwater that I have on my boat. And I don't know if it's just because it's my confidence bait, so I pick it up the most, but I feel like the bites are, aggressive. 9 times out of 10, they connect pretty well with it. They don't miss it. So, and it seems kind of to me, it's a little bit of an odd, and it's a little bit of an odd size. It's kind of somewhere in between the bigger head and spooks or the Rapalas, like skitter walks.
Is it longer than 3 inches?
Yeah.
It's about a 4-inch plug.
It's about 4 inches. It's about the same length as a Rapala skitter walk, but it's a lot narrower. So I think it's just something visually a little different than some of the other topwaters that you see out on the market right now. So, which as you can tell, we have 5 or 6 sitting here.
Yeah, so I think just like we talked about with soft plastics, like having multiple styles of retrieves and differences in baits can sometimes be the factor of getting a big bite or getting more bites or finding a bite in a tough area. So that's why I'll fish a lot of different types of topwaters. A lot of times you can just stick with one topwater and get blown up. It's any of those 3 to 5 inch topwater plugs and just consistently throwing them. But sometimes a certain bait will really get fish fired up. So something that I'm excited to throw this year. This is a head-in slop nose, which I don't know if it was designed for bass or designed for what it was designed for, but I just saw it on Tackle Warehouse and had to buy it. But it's got, let's see if it'll focus for me. It might not. So it just looks like a normal plug, but it's got this collar. I don't know if you can see the collar around the head. So I think you essentially just reel it, and it's like wake baits are, there's a new craze to wake baits, but they've been around for a long time. I think it probably fishes like a wake bait was what I was expecting. And they also did it in like a very sexy black, gold, and orange color.
Yeah.
But I think since it's got that metal collar, it's going to have a little bit of a ting to it. You know, like you hear on like a jitterbug or like a buzzbait, you get that little aluminum ticking noise that goes with it, which trout can like. Another bait that I'm pretty stoked about is this spin walker. This is by 13 Fishing. 13 Fishing's definitely done a good job in both the fresh and saltwater world of kind of pushing the envelope, not just coming out and creating, you know, baits and reels and rods that are just like everyone else's, but really kind of changing it up. So this is a walk the dog plug, but it's got this really big keel on it. So I'm excited to see how that works. And then it's got this little, this is the exact same shape as what you would see on a buzzbait.
Yep.
But way smaller. And then it also hits this other like little flap of metal. There's a lot going on here. So they're either going to absolutely hate this thing or they're going to love it. But I think that there's going to be a scenario for it. Like like puppy drum, small redfish, I really struggle with getting to eat like a whopper plopper or any type of blade bait. But trout like it. Like trout love a whopper plopper. And I think this is going to be a lot like it. Like I think that noise is going to be really awesome while you're walking. Like click, 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 and you're getting that little tinging noise too.
And I was going to say, I mean,
they're going to hear it.
Yeah, they're going to hear it. And that's the big thing with like trout fishing. You know, we think about throwing a DOA shrimp underneath a popping cork and getting that noise. We, you know, talk about big splashy topwaters or working topwaters where, you know, the surface is textured or over deeper water and current seams and stuff. Something like that has that extra noise. Just something, that different pitch, whatever it is, can make a huge difference for them.
Yeah.
So, and the nice thing is too, is you can take a pair of pliers. Not saying that you want to, but after you fish it a little bit, you can do a few changes to the way the blade is or whatever to either get a different noise or a slightly different retrieve, something like that. I'm sure with those, like you can with a buzzbait or anything else.
Yeah, so that's some next level stuff right there.
Yeah, like that'll be some fun to play with.
It will be. And it's one of those baits, like this stuff is all stuff that like I would love if I was spending more time creating content, less time guiding, I would be able to fish more, do videos on this stuff. Like that's why I bought all these. Like I wanted to go out and fish these different baits and do videos on them, and I just haven't had time to, which sucks. But another, y'all have seen me talk about this on the other podcast, but the motorboat, creative name by 13 Fishing, just a soft plastic with the same deal. It's got like a buzzbait style tail on here. I haven't even thrown this, but I'm definitely going to do a video on this. I think there's going to be a lot of cool applications for this bait, and I could see it being a pretty badass barracuda bait if they made a bigger one. I think a barracuda would smoke the crap out of that thing.
So that could be good for redfish, like up along the grass edges and stuff, because it is weedless. That is, you know, I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but
pull it back or tilt it like this. There we go.
Yep.
There we go. That's it right there.
So
it's
completely
cool, and it's wider across the top than you think it is.
Yeah,
you know, it's almost an inch across the top. Not an inch, but
maybe 3/4 ish.
Yeah, 3/4 of an inch.
So,
and we're just going over some of these newer baits. So everybody's heard of the whopper plopper. Everyone's made a whopper plopper now too.
Yeah.
I like this Berkeley bait a little bit better because it's got a bigger tail on it. It's a little more cupped. One of the cool things about these, though, not even talking about trout fishing, but like catching AJs on them, catching jacks on them, like you can rip these super hard, and because of the way that tail works, it holds the bait on the water. Like you can't rip it, like even in swell and chop, like you can rip it real hard. Like a lot of topwaters or poppers will slip or skip across the surface, but that tail holds the bait in the water. So it'll slip every once in a while, but it's mind-blowingly surprising how well it stays sucked to the water.
That's awesome.
But out of all these baits, the one I'm the most excited about is the new Cane Walker 125 by Berkeley. So you've seen this style plug a lot with stripers up north. It's like what you would call a pencil popper.
Let's say tuna popper.
Yeah, it's just a long style walk the dog plug with a cup on the front, but just that size, that shape.
The profile, I think.
The profile, I think, is going to be money for trout. Yeah. Big trout. And the fact that head's going to, if you just through walking the dog with this thing, like that head's going to spit some water. The hooks on all of these Berkeley baits that are out of the box are perfect. Like you don't need to change them. They're real sticky, but they're also thick. They're not like your real light gauge wire. Really good noise to this bait. Even holding all the hooks, you've got a lot of good noise to it there. So I'm shaking that right by the mic, so it might be a little loud, but it's got a good pitch to it. You've got one larger ball bearing, and then you got a smaller ball bearing. So you've got kind of both of those sounds to it.
I would say that's a big thing, or something that you don't see in a lot of baits is that two-tone or two different frequencies that you get out of having the different size ball bearings.
For sure. For sure. And this is a little bit heavier bait, but you can still get away with throwing that on. Don't you think you could throw that on like a medium fast pretty easily?
Yeah, you could.
Maybe a 7.6.
Yeah, I would say you might want a little longer rod to throw it, but no, it would do just fine on that size.
Thank you. Well, let's dive into, before we get it, since we're already talking topwater, let's talk about a few of like our other confidence plugs that are, these are kind of off the wall. I mean, not the Whopper Plopper or the Chopo, but some of these other baits I've shown have been a little bit off the wall. But that's what's, like I said, that sometimes can be the key, like throwing something a little bit different, something they haven't seen. These trout have a lot of topwaters brought over them this time of year, so being a little bit different can be helpful. But for myself, my confidence, my go-tos, I like a Skitter Walk.
Yep.
I like a Skitter V. I like the larger size Skitter Walk too. I like a Spook Junior.
Yep.
I also like a Head and One Knocker.
Yeah. I was gonna say that for me, the Yozuri and the Head and One Knocker, those are like my top two, I think, for me. Yeah. Just they're two different ranges of pitch and sound, and they slightly have just a different walk to them. And I think, for me, those are like my two biggest confidence baits to go to.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. It's those two baits are money. And if I'm big fish hunting, not that a big fish won't eat a smaller topwater, but the full size spook, the 3-hook spook, taking the middle hook off, and upsizing the two other hooks a little bit, that's my big fish bait. And what's crazy is that's like almost a 6-inch plug, but you'll go catch 14-inch trout on it. You'll go catch 11-inch trout on it. They'll come up and smack it. You'll have them follow it to the boat. I've had like 4 or 5 small trout schooling underneath that thing coming all the way to the boat. So they're not scared of it. They'll definitely eat it. What about topwater colors? What's kind of your, if you had to pick 2 or 3 colors as far as your topwaters for trout go in the fall? What would they be?
In the fall, I stick to like a basic mullet color, which you can't see it on the Chopo in the box, but just a mullet color that's got a little translucence to it, I think is a good one for me. That's not necessarily, the translucent part isn't necessarily like a key to me, for me or anything, but I just particularly like those in general.
Yeah.
The other one is a bone white or a straight white. I feel like the pure white, like later in the day, does a little better for me, or that bone white does.
Bone white's a little milkier. Like it's a little more yellowish.
It's got a little cream color to it.
Cream.
But both of those I feel like fish really well for me. And then something in the dark realm, either a blackback, orange belly, greens and purples, some of those kind of funkier dark colors is kind of like the 3 that I try to stick with, I feel like, for the most part. First thing in the morning, definitely dark colors. And something loud, and then as the day kind of progresses, depending on what the weather conditions are outside, I try to switch over to that lighter color, either a lot smaller rattles or kind of a higher pitch. For me, is kind of how I make that transition. So
I like it. I think noise can be a lot, or can have a lot to do with it. I think my confidence go get blown up bait is always that one knocker. Like if I'm gonna just throw one bait and look for that blow up, it's going to be a one knocker. But a topwater is a topwater. A lot of times if a fish is going to eat a topwater, he's not going to be super picky about it, or at least show himself. But again, it's way more fun to have 100 different options and to play around with them. So if you're anything like me, you'll spend a lot of money on topwater plugs. And the sucky thing about topwater though is you buy all these plugs, you try the newest tackle box, and you try to keep everything. And then, all of a sudden, you open your tackle box, and it's freaking loaded with rust.
Yeah.
Even some of the new tackle boxes. Like, I wouldn't say this on YouTube because people would rip me apart and say it's my fault. But I've got rust in all my new Plano Edge boxes. Like, not all of them, but some of my Plano Edge boxes, I've got rust in them. Yeah. Especially my jig box, like my jigs for albies and.
I was gonna say it's so hard to keep rust out of them. Well, me and you did this years ago. I don't know if you're still keeping up with it, but the little desiccate dry packets.
So that's the Edge box comes with those in it.
Oh,
it built into these little things that you can change them out on. But
okay,
maybe I just didn't change it out enough. I don't think I've ever changed it out. So
that could be part of it. Yeah. I would say, I have the watertight Plano boxes, and even with those every year, I go through probably split rings and hooks on everything.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that we touched on in last week's episode. Having sharp hooks, especially when you're topwater fishing or hard bait fishing, as much as those fish are coming up to eat it and are trying to get it in their mouth, a lot of times they'll come up, and trout are notorious for this. When they come up, they don't just eat it. They'll come up and they'll smack it with the side of their face and, hit the plug kind of like this. And if your hooks aren't sharp, tacky, where they're going to grab on, probably half of my fish during trout season are hooked just on the outside of the face.
Your topwater and hard fish, yeah.
And
that's why it's so important to keep tacky hooks, sticky hooks.
And
change them out or keep a little file on your boat and sharpen them out. That's what I do throughout the season. Even my DOAs, I'm sharpening them.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna say, my jig hooks are the same way because I'll just cut them off, throw them in a cup holder, and I forget about them. Then I go out and I'm like, oh, and then I look at it, I'm like, nope, just leave it there. I'll deal with it later. Tie a brand new one on because every time that could be the difference between a couple fish that day or not.
Yeah, and you hate to see that 28-inch fish come up and shake his head and throw your hook out, and you reel it back in. It's rusty and dull.
Yeah.
So food for thought.
Yeah,
food for thought. But yeah, if you're going to be new to topwater fishing, or you haven't tried a one knocker, I think a one knocker in chartreuse and white, red or white, or bone, or really any color. Get a couple colors that you like. Yeah. But that one knocker is a trout freaking killer, and redfish. The redfish love it too. So. That's a good one. And for like you're out of the outside of the norm topwater this year, try this cane walker, the 125. I think that's going to be I think this bait's, well, I can't say it's going to surprise me because I'm claiming it. And actually, I just realized it has one small bearing, really small bearing in the head. So you've got 3 different pitches. So especially on like a little bit choppier day, not super slick calm, I think this thing's going to be money. Yeah.
Well, and I think too. So we can talk a little bit about retrieves while we're here on topwater. Like, I always have in my head when I'm fishing like redfish, constant retrieve. Don't let it stop. If you let it stop, you might as well reel it to the boat, start it over. Just about it. Unless, there's certain zones that I'm fishing or whatever, cast it out, let it sit for a second, or and I haven't got to where I want to necessarily bring it over a fish or bring it through kind of the strike zone per se. But for trout, that doesn't always hold true.
Right.
Is there something that you change or do differently once you start stepping into trout season versus like the rest of the year?
Yeah, so trout don't mind a pause, and sometimes it fires them up a little bit. Like we were talking about last week about giving them that moment of, was that last week or was that this week? Okay. About giving them that moment of vulnerability to strike. Pausing that topwater is exactly that. And when I'm pausing a topwater, it's either, there's a couple of reasons. It's either I got blown up on and he didn't get the hook, so I'm letting it sit for a second and then pop, 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 and then letting it sit. Or I'm trying to let it hang in that strike zone a little bit longer. Like tick, 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 pause. Like if most of your blowups have been coming like once it gets out over the edge where the oyster bar stops or where the current seam ends, like, I'm pausing it and killing it right there, just giving it that extra little bit. And, a lot of times it's right as that plug starts to move again, they blow it up. Or sometimes it's like right when it stops, they'll blow it up. It's, that right at that changing moment is when they capitalize on it. So, I would say either to keep it hanging up in a strike zone longer, or if a fish has shown interest to be like, hey, you can catch this thing, like come try it again. It's sitting right here. kind of trying to entice that second bite out of them.
I was gonna say, I think for me, like a lot of times I'll do maybe like 2 quick twitches and keep it kind of tight, and then maybe just a real slow and let it kind of kick out to one side, and then a couple of tight ones and let it come out to one side and kind of just give it not necessarily a lot of don't make it super erratic to where it's unbelievable, but just something where it's a little bit different than what you've had, or throws it outside that norm of where that bait should be at if they're tracking underneath or from behind it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's, those are your main reasons for pausing and when to pause and all that. Well, let's get into subsurface. Y'all have heard us talk a lot of topwater on the podcast, but like every time we talk about it, we've probably learned something new as well, or have a new way to talk about it, or a new way to share it. It's like all this stuff is ever changing, and there's more to learn and whatnot. So sharp hooks on your topwaters, though. I can't stress that enough. Don't throw the rusty plug. Like And keep a file on your boat in case all of a sudden you go and you open your box, you're like, oh, they're eating topwater and they're all rusty. You can shave it down a little bit and fix it up. Yeah. So.
And also, one quick tip: toothpaste, paper towel. If you get rust in your box and it gets on the paint job or your colors are looking dull, that kind of thing, instead of throwing it away and going and buy a new one, get a $2 tube of the cheap toothpaste at Walmart or local wherever, Dollar General, and just rub it onto your plug. Take your hooks off, take your split rings off, paper towel, just kind of buff them out really good with the toothpaste. Clean them up really good. Rinse them off in the sink.
What is it? Just enough grit in there to kind of sand it down a little bit?
Yeah, it's basically like a polishing compound that you would get for your car or something. Nice. But it's just a cheap, easy way.
Doing to our teeth. Too.
Yeah, and I mean, and it all comes off, even if it smells minty fresh. It comes off. It'll go away in a few days. You don't have to worry about it. So whereas something like for your car might leave more residue or something.
Yeah, a little odd scent to it.
Yeah.
So. Well, cool. Well, yeah, we'll jump into some subsurface baits. If you go subsurface hard bait, what's your go-to? I know we keep talking about go-to, but I mean that's the best we can share with you is our favorite baits.
See that's hard for me because typically this time of year I'm throwing some like 5-inch jerk shads or jerk baits of some sort, kind of that slender, long profile, with a short bill that only dive like maybe 3-4 foot deep, and that's because I'm doing striper fishing as well as trout fishing most of the time. Once I start picking up that hard bait, getting into that time of the year, I don't really necessarily have like a particular brand or anything that I like over one over the other. I'm a sucker for cheaper ones or whatever I can find on sale, just because it's such a small time of year, at least for me, that I fish them. Because I stick just so much with the soft plastics. I have so much more confidence in that as my style of fishing. It's what I prefer to do more. It's something that I would love to get into more and fishing the hard baits. But just jerk shads or jerk baits in general.
Yeah, I fish a lot of jerk baits. Like I said, I don't, I fish soft plastics more a lot of times. But when I'm fishing those low current areas like the New River, like the Neuse River, the Pamlico River, the Punga River, any of those tributaries of the Pamlico Sound, it is hard to beat a hard bait. Yeah. No pun intended. And I was pulling these up so I could show y'all a picture. I fish a lot of mirror lures, a lot of 17s, a lot of 27s, a lot of hard bait, a lot of jerk baits. And a very common jerk bait you see in the saltwater world is just the X-Wrap. Like if people fish a jerk bait for trout, a lot of times it just ends up being
an
X-Wrap. But there's a lot of different bass jerk baits you buy. You change up you can fish the hardware that's on them. You just got to clean them well. You got to dump some fresh water on them, bring them home, set them on a paper towel on your boat, dry them off, let them sit there, and put them back in your box. But the Mega Bass jerk baits. There's Lucky Craft, which is a Japanese company that makes really, really good jerk baits. You can spend $100 on a jerk bait if you wanted to. I mean, I don't recommend that unless you're trying to win hundreds of $1,000s bass fishing, but you can spend a lot of money on a jerk bait. Another bait that fishes just like a mirror lure that I started fishing 2 years ago with, y'all probably know if you're local, but Ben Chesney, he's a manager at Intercoastal Angler. Is this Rapala, it's X-Wrap Twitch and Mullet. So it's got a shape a lot like a mirror lure. They come with these single inline hooks. Immediately take those off, throw them away, and buy treble hooks for it. I say this because the first time me and Ben fished this together, we were fishing. Ben was throwing it. I was throwing him a 17. He was throwing this, and he had 3 big bites. Eat the bait, come up, head shake. Like one of them was like this table right here. It moved. It was this size boil on the water. Like it was.
That's insane.
It was a 28, 29-inch fish that ate it. Came up. I mean, he drilled it with the hook set. Came up, threw the hook out. Like watch this massive head just throw the hook out on that single hook. And we're like, oh, we should probably change the hooks on that. And then we just keep fishing it. And like 20 minutes later, he gets another massive bite on it. Sets the hook. Fish shakes it. Head comes out of the water on the first or second head shake, throws the hook. And then 2 or 3 hours go by. We fish some other stuff, and then he puts that back on, hooks another really big fish, and he caught fish on that too. But all the bigger trout were able to throw that inline hook out really, really well.
Yeah.
And then finally, I popped some hooks off one of my mirror lures and put them on there for him. I was like, you know what? I'm going to change the hooks for you. And we didn't get another bite on it. So,
oh man.
But that bait is a good big fish bait. It's a little bit bigger than a 17. It's not quite as big as a 27.
Gotcha.
And it's got real good movement to it. Here's another good picture of a few of them so that y'all can see, a color difference or some of the colors they have. Like here's a real natural looking mullet. Mm-hmm. This color here, the second from the bottom, like the second one, the one at the top of his palm, not the bottom of his palm, is the color that Ben hooked all those big fish on that day. And I've gone back and caught really nice fish on that bait as well. And that white one. Let me see if I can find that exact color on here. This one.
It looks like kind of like glass shad.
Yeah, it is a badass color. But that's the color. That's the... I can't find the name of it here, but y'all see it. Screenshot it if you need to. That's a good color, the Twitch mullet. So there's a bait that I just fished for the first time this past year with Bud up on the Pamlico. Mm-hmm. And this is like, so if you're from the Pamlico, you're going to be like, you're an idiot. This is not new news, but, or fishing the Pamlico with Albemarle Sounds. You've heard of the twitch and wrap, but no one down here really fishes the twitch and wrap. It's a balsa wood hard bait that was made by Rapala for a while, and they stopped making it. It's a longer, little bit skinnier, but longer. So it's like a little bit longer than a 27, but not quite as tall as it. And it's a little skinnier. And it's a wooden suspending bait.
Okay.
And that is a killer. I mean, a lot of those trout tournaments up there are won on that. You can still find these. A lot of people have went and bought out all the old twitch and wraps, like from places that had them. So if you want a twitch and wrap, you can hunt for it. But I think they'll still make them for you. I think you can actually buy them at Neuse River Bait and Tackle this time of year.
Okay.
Because they'll make a really large order of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go, and they'll still create them for them, but you can't like go online and find a twitch and wrap. Like you can, I think you can only get them at Neuse River Bait and Tackle. But if you fish the New River or any of the the slower anywhere you want a slow suspending twitch bait, definitely check out the twitch and wraps. Call Neuse River Bait and Tackle, see if you can get them from them. I'm not positive on that. I've not bought one there, but that's what I've heard. I heard that last year when I was looking for some.
Gotcha.
There's a purple and white. That's money, and there's a chartreuse. And I'll see if I can pull up a picture of it so y'all see what I'm talking about. But what were you going to say? Sorry.
No, you're good. I just listening and paying attention to what you got going on. I mean, for me, like, I do fish the the M17s and M27s, and I think that just has a lot to do with the ability to change, with down here we fish just so much current. Having that heavy Dean and some of the bigger baits, that kind of stuff, make a big difference, I feel like, for me, and just having confidence in what I'm doing. Because I can fish them a little bit faster. I know I'm achieving the depth that I want, but as you know, I'm more of a power fisherman. I don't have that slow finesse. Sit and wait, work a twitch bait like that as much as you do. So. Oh
man, you do. Don't hate on yourself like that.
I don't do it as much as you do.
Here we go. Here's a Rapala twitch and wrap. It's a badass little rig. Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to find a common color. We'll just pull this one up there. I have not fished this color, but this gives you the gist of what we're talking about as far as shape goes.
Yeah.
You see how it's a little bit longer. And just knowing that it's a wood bait, like, it's going to act so different. There's a lot of people in the bass world that pay, like, professionals that'll pay a lot of money for, like, handmade crankbaits, wooden crankbaits. They just ride differently. Their movement's different. There's a video. I was fishing with Bud, and on our last, we worked hard that day. We found the fish. We lost them. We found them again, but we doubled up, and I had like a 22 3-inch fish, and he had a 26-inch fish on a purple and white twitch and wrap right at the end of the day. But really great baits, and maybe we can do a massive order of them through Eastern Current and do like a custom color. That'd be pretty sweet. I mean, they're really, really solid baits. So,
heck yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. What's another hard bait you like to throw?
So Jud knows this, but probably our listeners don't. But I do enjoy watching a guy out he's now in Texas that bass fishes a lot, and he works with 6 Sense.
Who is it?
Milliken Fishing.
Oh yeah.
Some of his older content when he fished a lot, especially up north, Nebraska. He's from like the Omaha area. He fished a ton of jerk baits, and all of them were from 6 Sense. So that's the other one that I will pick up and throw from them if I can find them. They're just not super easily available like off the shelf here. I think they're starting, 6 Sense is starting to grow a lot more now. So I used to have to like order them. And I just didn't do that very often, once a year or something. So that's the other one that I will throw. But
here is, just so y'all see, just the detail on, this is a Megabass. This is a Vision 110. Just the detail and the coloration and the body style and the hooks. These angled hooks are much stronger. So with that angling, you get to fish a very light wire hook, but add strength to it. So that's the whole point of those tight angles like that. Those hooks are so sticky. I mean, they're so hard to even get out of the packaging without sticking yourself in the hand.
Yeah.
But that's a bait. I mean, that's a big fish bait that people in North Carolina don't fish very much. Now, there's guys that love a jerkbait and that fish a jerkbait, but most people don't fish a jerkbait. There's one guy that fishes this one area near Rich's Inlet. He has a tower yellowfin, and I see him fishing a jerkbait a lot. And he's got this tactic, and it works for him, and he sets up current and throws, like you were talking about, swimming a bait back to you, but he'll just kind of, drop troll a jerkbait behind him and work it back to the boat, and catches a lot of trout like that. But in the faster current areas, these jerkbaits, they still work well. Like like a heavy Dean, especially like a 6-footer, like one of these baits that's going to get down, or an 8-footer or a 12-footer. If you're fishing like 5 to 8 feet of water and can work it kind of fast and still get some good pauses, you can catch fish in heavy current on a jerkbait. So the other cool thing about nice jerkbaits is they throw way better. You buy a crappy jerkbait, and I'm not saying the extra apps are crappy, but they don't cast super well. But these 110s, they've got a weight transfer system in it where the bearings, so when you go to cast, that weight transfers towards the tail, and it pulls that bait out there. I mean, you can throw that super light 110, like you can bomb it. They're painful to lose. They're about $25 a piece. But here's another cool.
And there's, as you're talking through this too, like realize too, these are baits that you can use for striper. You can go off the beach, you can troll with them, slow troll. We used to do that a lot for like bonita and different stuff. But there are different grades, and different manufacturers make them either wire through or not wire through. I know the Rapalas are not. So if you're going to throw it around a lot of heavy structure and you're going to be hitting, either down trees or pylons or something like that, it will probably pay for you to spend the extra $5 or whatever it is to get a wire through X-Wrap or a wire through jerkbait if you can find one that you like. And just because I know for me, throwing them in the river, I've hit pilings and different stuff, and then I hook up on a striper and it explodes just because I cracked the plastic or whatever, and that fish is gone. So, the bait's still going to be trash, but at least you'll get your fish in.
Yeah, exactly. So, but jerk baits are one of those kind of like in our world of saltwater fishing here in North Carolina, like a pretty untapped bait. Like not a lot of people are fishing jerk baits that often, and they're just a really good bait to fish. They're a great search bait. They got a lot of presence. It's like, it's like combining a mirror lure and a gold spoon almost, like or a spinner bait and a mirror lure. So. And the other cool thing too, just like a paddle tail, which for years and years, like I never just straight retrieved a paddle tail. I twitched it in and bounced it off the bottom, but you can just swim a paddle tail straight back to the boat and catch fish. Same thing with a jerk bait. Like you can, especially red fishing, you can throw it up on the bank and just slow roll it back to you off the bank, and that thing just kind of wobbles back to you, and fish love it and they'll crush it. So a lot of ways to fish a jerk bait. So. We could do just a jerkbait episode. Talking about jerkbaits. I
was about to say, was there any other hard baits that you're excited for this year that you've seen, like subsurface stuff?
So I guess let me go. So Topwaters. I'm going to call them like suspending twitch baits, like a mirror lure or like that Rapala lure I was talking about, or the twitch and wrap. And then jerk baits. And then crankbaits. Those are kind of the only, but for trout, I mean, I fish crankbaits for redfish, but I don't think it's necessarily, it's a little too aggressive of a bait for a trout in those stillwater scenarios. I think they would work in the right scenario, but I've never fished one for trout, so I really can't speak to it.
I would say, and I even have some friends that fish kind of these slower water areas with rattle traps.
Oh yeah, rattle traps is another great one.
And, me, I don't do it
Similar
very often.
to a suspending twitch bait, but not the same.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just, the way you can move it and get it up off the bottom and let it shake and shimmy and fall back down, it just has that different fall rate, different noises and pitches. It just gives you a lot more options than what you, not necessarily than what you can get with a jerkbait, but depending on the scenario and what you're trying to accomplish and the way that you want to fish it, just depends. Those might be a good option also. For sure. To step over to.
That's another bait that a lot of guys have started fishing up in the Pamlico, like popping cork fishing for bull drum. They'll fish a rattle trap, a little more subtle, can fish it differently. So for stripers, for trout, those are great baits. Yeah. And like you can even find some micro rattle traps, like some pretty small rattle traps that are smaller than like a 17 that can work pretty good in different scenarios. So I'm glad you brought the rattle trap. I almost forgot that one. But a lot of like, we've fished like it's like a lipless crankbait essentially. So but a way that I've seen them be productive or heard of them being productive. I haven't fished them much, but in saltwater is kind of yo-yoing them or hopping them on the bottom, like Mike was talking about. You throw it out there, let it sink, and then you lift it up, and then let it fall back down to the bottom, and then and let it fall back down to the bottom. So
and you want, whenever you pick it up off the bottom, you want to feel that bait kick. Yeah. If your rod tip isn't vibrating, and you may have to step up to a stiffer rod. We talked with plastics last week, having to step down rod size so that you can get that sensitivity. Switching back over to these hard baits, you still want that soft tip because you're fishing trebles, but you definitely want to have a little more backbone than what you would be having, or what you would have with the soft plastics. For sure. So it's definitely a rabbit hole you can go down. Don't feel like you have to run out and grab all new stuff for it, but look at the rod setups that you got, and whenever you are pulling that bait off the bottom, make sure you got enough backbone to get that bait to move and do what it's supposed to.
For sure. Yeah, like Mike said, a nice, a good backbone on a rod, but you don't want a hard tip or you're going to pull those trebles out. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If y'all want us to kind of do a deep dive on any specific hard bait that we've talked about, or like last week, any specific soft plastic, let us know. We can do that. We're going to try to do some more on the water video stuff. Mike is full-time on the water now as well, and so we're going to have a lot more time to put that content out there. So let us know what y'all want to see over here on Patreon. We're going to try to give you everything you want. So that was our deep dive, our bird's eye view at everything hard baits. Yeah. But a lot of people, they just have their couple 17s and a skitter walk, and that's all they're going to do hard bait wise. But venture out a little bit, try some other stuff this year, get you some jerk baits. Get you some lipless crankbaits or rattle traps and fish them. Like, especially if you're, it's a good hard bait bite and some fast current, a heavy rattle trap will get down. Just like a heavy Dean, like a 17 that's heavy. We'll do the same thing. So, anything else, Mike?
No, thinking about like baits that I'm excited for this year, being that I'm on the water full time, like this is one area that I want to kind of dive into. And we were talking about 6 Sense a minute ago. 6 Sense come out with, I don't know if it's out yet where you can buy it, but it's called a glide bait. Mm-hmm. And, it's a very large profile. If you're into bass fishing or watch any of that, there's the Hinkle Shad and all kinds of different big glide baits out there. I think that's something, if they're not too crazy expensive, I want to try that. Especially
I've got some glide baits to be painted right in there.
Okay. So, yeah.
And this is a glide bait.
Yeah, there you go. So
painted up like a brown trout. So
that one's a massive one, and I don't know. I'm not sure what the size of the new glide bait from 6 Sense is going to be, but I know they're going to be affordable for the most part. Right. And for me, that's something, and they stand behind it, and I've watched the guy fish it a lot, so that's something that I want to try this year. So
heck yeah, we should paint one of these up like a speckled trout.
That'd be awesome.
Or like a croaker or a spot. Mm-hmm. So you can get it waylaid.
Definitely.
Well, sweet. Well, guys, hope y'all enjoyed our second official podcast for Patreon. Share it with your friends. Get them over here on Patreon. Thank y'all so much for the support. And we'll see you next week. Later.
Have a good one.